I got something really cool in store for you today. I received my Bluetti AC500 and my B300s batteries. In this video, I'm gonna get it unboxed. I'm gonna discuss the specifications, run a DC discharge, a capacity test on the battery itself, get it connected to my transfer switch, hook it up to solar, and do some load testing, and explore the app. And I'm gonna be running a couple tests that you might not be able to find anywhere else. I have a couple surprises for you. Hey, it's Justin from Justin's Project. If you're new here, I focus on testing all sorts of energy-related products and building out a sustainable lifestyle. I'll share my successes, failures, and everything in between. If you find that type of content useful, consider clicking the subscribe button and tapping that notification bell so when I put out new videos, you get notified. And I'll have all the links in the description below that I mentioned throughout this entire video. Be sure to check those out because I'll have discount codes that could save you a lot of money. Let's go get the lights turned on, get this thing out of the box, and have some fun. And the AC500 inverter is 14 inches tall, 20 and a half wide, and 13 inches deep, and is weighing in at 67.4 pounds. And the dimensions of the B300s is 20 and a half by 12 and a half and 10 and a half tall. And it's rather heavy at 84.2 pounds. Considering the size and weight of this is still considered a portable power station, and it kind of falls in the category of an ESS, the energy storage systems. But some of the most popular applications for this is off-grid, doing it just as a backup, using it outdoors, RVing, camping, and just using it during travel. The AC500 has enough power to power your lights, your air conditioners, your refrigerators, microwaves, and even heaters, all at the same time. And what I love most about the AC500 is that it's modular, meaning that you can expand from one battery to 6 batteries, and it acts as an all-in-one system. So you have your inverter, your batteries, everything connects together simply by just connecting these cables right here, and you're good to go. The AC500 is a 5,000 watt inverter with a surge capabilities of up to 10,000 watts. And that pairs with the B300s batteries with 3,072 watt hours of capacity. And it's expandable up to 18,432 watt hours. The B300 batteries have a self-heating module built inside of it that allows you to charge these batteries well below 32 Fahrenheit, all the way down to -4 Fahrenheit. And Bluetti always puts out high quality products, so I wouldn't expect anything less than a LiPo4 battery here. And this is exactly what we got. Those are the most durable, long lasting, and safe batteries on the market. It does have its own solar input port that you could charge this with solar. You could charge it with a charger, or you can charge it with the power that's coming into the inverter and then charge it up through the inverter. Front of the battery, it does have its own independent battery indicator in increments of 20%, so 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100%. It has an on and off switch, so to turn these on, you press that switch to turn these 3 ports on. You have a 12 volt, 10 amp car charger, then a USB-C 100 watt, and then a USB-A 18 watt. And this right here would turn off both of them if I press this, and it turns off the entire unit. And the last ports we need to talk about are the battery ports. And you have one that would go into the inverter, and then this one would go into an expansion battery. If this battery was in the middle, this could go to another battery and then go down to another expansion battery. And to turn the unit back on, you can use this button or the button on the battery. We'll use the inverter, so you press, hold for a second, and then let off. Let it turn on, hit initializing, and now we're good to go. And let's discuss all the outputs that are on the front, and then we'll talk more about the settings a little bit later. I'm gonna start up here in the left-hand corner of the DC outputs. So we have a 12 volt, 30 amp output. Then we have a 24 volt, 10 amp output. Do not plug in your 12 volt appliances into this port because you can cause damage to your appliances. If we move over to the right here, we have 2 USB-C 100 watt ports, and then we have 2 USB-A 18 watt ports, and then we have 2 more USB-A 5 volt ports, 3 amps. Let's shift our focus down to the AC outputs. I'll start over here to the left. We have 3 20 amp, 120 volt outlets. And I've read that there should be more than 3 of these. We could possibly fit 6 in this area. I kind of disagree. I think they did the right thing by putting 2 30 amp plugs here, because each one of these serves a different purpose, because we have a 3-prong and a 4-prong. Of course, we have the 50 amp max right here, and this will allow us to put this into series and then get 240 volt system out of it. Then we have the battery ports. We have this one running down to the battery, and then we have the AC input. Then we have the DC input for your solar, and you can go from 12 to 150 volts, and you can have that at 15 amps on 2 different branches. And I'll show you the adapter for that a little bit later. And then we have a communications interface port here. On top of the unit, it has 2 wireless charging areas at 15 watts each. The way that we control it is by a touch screen, and to turn on and off your AC and DC, you'll touch that and then turn it on. Turn that on. To turn it off, you gotta tap it and hit off. Tap it and hit off. We can see the PV input, the DC load, the grid that we're pulling power from the grid, and the AC load that we're using from the inverter. Over here we have settings, data, and alarm. In the settings, there's all sorts of different settings that you can change and customize as you would like. Data basically is going to give you your product info, the input and output, the battery information, and alarm history. And then we can also see alarm history, which if you click on alarm, and we can clear the history by clicking clear and yes. And then we can always go home, let's say if we were in settings, by hitting the home button. So we have the battery status, and everything that you need to do, you can do right here from this screen. You can also control most of this from the app. This is everything that's included with your AC500 and your B300s battery. I'll start with the battery cable first, because this is how you connect your inverter to the battery. Then you'll have a connector that connects into your solar panel or your solar array that you can charge the battery directly from solar, and a user manual. The AC500 comes with a bag and a strap to keep everything organized, a user manual, the AC input charger cable, a DC and MC4 cable connector, and your DC to your solar array connector that can connect up to 2 branches. And the overall capacity is 2,620 watt hours. The total test time was 22 hours and 46 minutes. On our DC discharge, we came in right at 85.2% efficiency, which I'm pretty happy with, because the industry standard is anywhere from 82 to 85% efficiency, and we came in right at the high side of that. Now we're going to do an AC discharge. We'll do the overload a little bit later to see if we can overload this unit. That's going to be pretty hard, because this is a 5,000 watt inverter with a 10,000 watt surge. So to complete this test, we're just going to use this watt meter. We'll plug it in to the AC side. Then we'll plug in our heat gun. Then we'll turn on the unit. And this is going to monitor how much energy is coming through the outlet to power the heat gun. And see how close we get to 3,072 watt hours. And it came in at 2,766 watts. That is right at 90% efficiency. So that's definitely a really good number, and I'm happy with that. I think it's important to take a sound level test and get the decibel reading of the actual sound level that's coming out of this unit when we have a large load coming in on a charge side. We're charging right around 1,800 watts. So the fans have kicked on, and I want to see exactly where we're at. And coming in at 49 to 50 decibels, that's an extremely quiet inverter. I don't know how Bluetti does it, but I'm glad they do. Now that we have this charged back up, I'm gonna do some load testing. And the easiest way to do that on a power station when you only have 120 volts is to get one of these adapters. This is a 3-prong adapter that adapts into a 4-prong cord that then plugs into your 30 amp transfer switch. And on this transfer switch, every one of these breakers are single pole breakers, meaning each one has 120 volts on them. This adapter sends that power through this cord, and it actually charges these at 120 volts rather than 240 volts like a double pole breaker would. It just makes things really easy to do that. So be sure to check the links in the description below. I'll leave a link to that cord because you may need that in your situation if you're using a 30 amp transfer switch. Now, if you're pairing this with another AC500 and you're doing 240 volts, then this transfer switch is not the transfer switch for you. This is a 30 amp and you would need a 50 amp. So anyway, let's get started with the load testing. And the way that we want to do this is go in on the system and we turn this on. You'll see that this will change the color, light up. So now the power is going into the transfer switch, and then we'll go ahead and switch one over to generator. You see a little bit of a flicker there. Now we have the AC500 powering all the lights in my shop here. And I do have a consistent 3.6 to 3.7 kilowatts of consumption, and I've been doing that for about 15 minutes and I've had absolutely no problem whatsoever. So at this point, I'm very impressed with this because with 5,000 watts, I was able to turn things on and turn an air compressor on while we had other appliances consuming electric. I've never had a portable power station even run that compressor, more or less run that compressor when we got other things operating in line with it. We did get up to 5,300, 5,400 watts, and that's okay. We can run that for a small amount of time, over 5,000 watts, and never damage this unit whatsoever. And it would actually kick it off. If you continue to run that for a long period of time, it would protect it because it's got protections in place that it's not going to allow you to run it over that. It's designed for 5,000 watts to run continuously, and it can surge to 10,000 watts for a very, very short amount of time. And I'm going to run this for a little bit longer just to see if we have any issues, but I'm not having any problem out of it, even when we did surge over the 5,000 watts. So I tested that for about 20 minutes, had absolutely no problems out of it. What I like about this is that 5,000 watts. That 5,000 watts, even on 30 amps feeding these 6 circuits, I think I would be able to run this shop with no problem. Now, later on, I'm gonna be moving into having 2 mini splits put in here, and I'm gonna have to have the 240 volt option. So I'll have to definitely get 2 of these to be able to run that. But that's my goal, is to be able to take this shop off grid. And I think this is gonna be the unit that's gonna allow me to do that. Because even with the 30 amps, I was able to turn on everything that I would ever run right now in this shop all at the same time, and I never do that. So that leads me into my next test. I'm gonna test this for the next 6 to 12 hours just under normal use, and we're gonna get it charged back up and see if one battery would be enough that I would be able to do all that, or would I need to expand this into more, maybe 2 or 3 different batteries for me. If this was on your house, depending on the amount of power that you're consuming over that period of time is how you calculate how many batteries you need. Now that I've had the AC500 powering the shop for roughly 16 hours now, we didn't run into any surprises, and I didn't expect it to happen, especially after that short-term test that we just completed. It did use a little bit of power, and I'll explain why. In that short-term test, you'll see me turn on a TV, but the TV stayed black, the screen, because it wasn't connected to my Amazon Fire Stick. So I forgot and left the TV on the entire time that we were doing this test. So it was consuming a pretty good amount of power just from that and from other items that we have plugged in the shop. Plus, this unit uses roughly around 32 watts an hour when you just have it in standby mode. So that's important to know. Even if you don't have anything connected to this and you have it turned on, that you're going to use a little bit of power. 32 watts to 34 watts is a very good number when you're considering an inverter of this size. So my long-term test, I'm gonna call that 16 hours, as a much success. Now we're gonna get this connected to some solar and check the inputs. And if we look right here on the cord, you'll see that they're clearly marked for PV1 and PV2. And we're only going to be hooking up one of these today, so we're only going to use PV1. And I wish Bluetti would offer a cord with only one PV array that would connect in addition to this two, because I'm not going to be using two arrays on this system. So it would be nice to have an additional cord with only one PV hookup. In this segment, we're going to talk about the solar input, how much you can actually put into each MPPT. This has two strands that I briefly discussed coming out of this cord that we can hook up two arrays. Now I have four 400 watt panels attached to this right now. I don't have a larger array to connect to it. I do have up to 6, but because of the voltage that's coming out of those panels, 4 is my safe zone. If I get 5, I'll be pushing it. 6, I'll definitely go over what the voltage is saying the input is capable of. The voltage it says right here is 12 volts to 150 volts. So I don't want to get like 151 volts. I'm sure it has some type of protection in that. I'm not going to risk it. It's too expensive of a unit to risk something like that. Keep it below 150 volts per string. So we have roughly 961 watts coming in to charge the unit right now. As the sun continues to rise, that'll go up a little bit. We should get close to somewhere right around 1,500 to 1,600 watts out of those 4 panels. And that would be enough to charge this on my usage for an entire day. It would charge the battery back up to 100%. Now, if you had these batteries expanded up to that 18 kilowatt hours, then you would probably need a larger array connected to this, or those 2 arrays connected to this to be able to handle that. We could also use the option of hooking in solar directly into the battery. The problem with that is it's only 12 to 60 volts. And what we have right now is close to 125 volts out there. So for this scenario, we're going to stick with charging through the inverter. I could see charging the battery if you were using a smaller array and you were just wanting to focus on the individual batteries and you didn't need to do any power from the inverter. Then the battery would be the most efficient way of doing that because you're sending it directly to the battery. But in most scenarios, we're going to use the inverter to send the power to the battery to charge those up. With that said, I am using the app and we have a lot of different options in here. And while this charges up, you're going to see a lot of things in here actually change. We're going to add the AC input along with the DC input and see how that works. If we have it plugged into an outlet, there's a receiving AC power to charge the batteries, to help charge with them in conjunction with the actual solar system that we have attached to it too. We want to talk about the different types of settings that are inside the app. We're going to go through all of the different things. We can see a lot of cool stuff inside the app, and we can control this manually from anywhere in the world. Just plugged in the grid over here to this outlet, and we've got 1,800 watts coming in from the grid and 1,000 watts coming in from the solar array. And to further the test even more, I've hooked up this little heater into one of these 20 amp outlets because I haven't went over these just yet. So I want to make sure to cover that along with the overview on this AC500. So we need to turn this on. That will kick on. And now we have 1,600 watts coming out of the unit. We have 1,790 watts coming in from there and 1,048 coming in from solar. There's only one other thing we need to do. We need to put a DC load on this. I do have this device that I'm doing a screen recording of the app while I'll do this test. So I'll plug it in to the USB 18 and then we'll turn on the DC. And now we have a load coming out of there. And you can see that everything is in real time between the app and the actual screen that's on the AC500. Let's add this up. We have around 2,800 watts coming in from the solar array and the AC grid, and we have roughly 1,200 watts going out to power the devices. So really, we're still charging the battery, although we have a large load up here and a very small DC load down there. While we're conducting that test, let's take a look at the app, because from here we can see exactly what's happening with the system, what we got coming in from the solar array, what we got coming in from the grid, and what we're discharging out to our DC load or our AC loads. We can turn on or off the DC loads and AC loads from the app itself. You'll see that it turned off the DC, anything that was going out, and we can do the same for the AC. So now that we have those turned off, we only got input coming in, but let's turn those back on, and now you'll start seeing those work again. We can also monitor the battery packs. We only have one battery pack, but from here you can see the state of charge and the BMS status is in charge and how they're actually connected. All right, so let's head back so there ain't much more to see there. If we go to the upper right hand corner up here, you'll see a gear. This is important because this is going to be the area where you manage your working mode. Your working mode is very important. But before we get to that, let's look at the power lift mode. That is, if you're going to be using something that draws a lot of power to start up, turn on the power lift mode. That is going to help you power up those type of appliances. But for me, I don't need that on right now. I've ran everything with that turned off. Then we have a silent charging mode. We got auto sleep, which I have that turned to never because I want the screen to be on at all times. We can upgrade the software down here, advanced settings, and just kind of go through that. But let's talk about the working mode. The working mode is the type of mode you put this in for your uninterrupted power supply. That's your UPS mode. We have 4 different ones that we can use here: a standard UPS, a PV priority UPS, a time controlled UPS, and a customized UPS. In my scenario, most of the time, I'm going to be using a standard UPS or a time controlled UPS. Time controlled UPS is very important for anyone that has increased pricing during peak hours, because you can come in here and set when you want to charge the unit if during the day, during those peak hours, and then we can discharge from or pull power from the grid during those off-peak hours, avoiding those peak hour rates. So that's really cool, and I love that most of these units now have the UPS, but with Bluetti, every one that I've tested up to this point has the UPS function, and they work fabulously. And that's a basic rundown of the app. If you would like to know more about the app or you'd like to download it, I'll have links in the description below. My final thoughts on the AC500 and the B300s battery is it outperformed in every category that I put it in. And we didn't have any type of problems with things that I have researched that other people are stating that there was problems with. I just had no problems with them. The display screen, I heard that that was fixed in a firmware, and I can confirm that I had no issues with the display or even the display to the app communicate between one another through Bluetooth or through Wi-Fi. Did absolutely perfect on that. The input from solar, the input from the AC, the output from the AC, the output from the DC, everything worked perfectly. Now, this is the first time that I've ever tested a portable power station up to 5,000 watts of output power, and it definitely performed better than any other portable power station that I have tested, and I expected it to, especially in that category. And I do agree with people thinking that this should have a larger MPPT charge controller rather than having two, just have one larger one. I would rather see that larger charge controller in this, although that probably would take the starting voltage up. It gives the operating voltage probably up to 500 volts. Rather than having 150 volts for our maximum, we'd boost that up to 500, but our starting range would be much higher as well. So there's trade-offs to that. There is benefits to having the two, but there's also benefits to having just the one for wire management and things like that. So if you've ever designed a solar system, wire management is huge. You want to make sure that you're managing the wires going to your system just as much as what the system is capable of. And if you're exploring the idea of a power station and an ESS, that you need the portability, but you also want to have the capability of backing up your house, I think this system is definitely one to look into. And I'm glad you stuck around to the end, and I hope I provided some value and answered questions that you might have had about the AC500 or the B300s battery backup system. I had a lot of fun testing this system out, and I can't wait to bring you more about it in future videos. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I hope to see you in my next one.